Hey everyone, in this quick tutorial we will be showing you how to create simple and effective damage indicators for your game. Now damage indicators are these floating numbers you see here on the screen, and when you hit an enemy, for example, they can really help the player feel the impact of their actions. So we will be taking a look at critical damage like shown here with the yellow, and then normal damage with the red. So let's jump into it. Alright, so first let's set up a basic scene. So we want to create a new 2D scene, which we will call player. In here we want to add a sprite 2D. We can do that by hitting Ctrl and A, or we can come over here and click on the plus icon. And now we want to also add a label. We will name this label damage label, and the sprite 2D can remain the same for now. Then what we want to do is we want to hit Ctrl and S to save this scene, which will create a new player scene here. Then we want to come over to the root node here, which we named player, and we want to add a script. We will call this player.gd, and we can click on create. Then in here we can remove everything that was there. Then we want to go ahead and add some variables. So the first variables we want to add are a duration. We want the indicator to be shown. So in our case we will do 1 second. Then we want 1 for the speed of the indicator to go up in our case, or another animation. You would use this to determine the speed at which it goes. And then we want a reference to our player. So we do this by dragging this over here and holding Control while we release. And we will just rename this to player for simplicity. Then we want our ready function, which we will be using later on. And then we have our input function. So in our input function, we want to do the input, obviously, which for now will just be a simple click of the enter key. But in your own solution, you'd probably want to make it a little bit more advanced. When a damage hits you or when you hit an enemy, you want to detect that and then show the damage. But in this case, just a quick tutorial, I will show you how to do it when we hit enter. So we go ahead and make sure we detect the input by typing this out. So if we have pressed the UI accept key, which by default is on enter, now if you want to make this your own key, you can come over to the project settings, and in here under input map, you can create your new action. So in this case, we'll just name it damage indication or indicator. Um, you'll obviously have your own name for this, but you probably won't even use a key when you do this. But yeah, that's one way to do it. So you hit plus and you can do the key and hit enter yourself. So that way we can now reference damage indicator, for example, and it will be the same as UI accept, but it's now our custom key. So then what we want to do is we want to determine the damage. So for this example, we just choose a random number between 5 and 15. And then we want to call our show damage function, which we will be creating right now. So below the input, we want to make a func show damage, which will take the amount as an int. And we don't return or anything, so we just hit void. And then we want to create a new damage label. Now that I think about it, we don't even need this damage label right here, so we can actually get rid of that. Then we want to make sure we have a color added to this. So in our case, we will just make it red. So we do this by typing damage label.add theme color override. We want to change the font color, and then we want to set the color. So in our case, we'll do red. And since it's RGB, we have the one for the R, so that way it's red. Then we want to set the text of the label to be the damage amount, obviously. There we go. And then we want to also set the position. I actually need to type .text here. Then we want to set the position of the label to be above the player. So in our case, we will be typing the position here. So damage label.position is the player.position plus just a little bit of an offset so that it shows above the player and not actually on top of the player. And just to add a bit of randomization, we will also add a bit of offset over here. So in this case, we'll do -20 and 20. So this way, it's always a bit of a random position above the player, and it's not at the same exact position the whole time, which just adds a little bit more immersion, in my honest opinion. Then we don't want to forget to add the damage label scene onto our, or not the damage label scene, we want to make sure we add the label onto our scene. So we don't forget that, and it is not going to disappear or not even work when we hit enter. So then we want to create a little bit of an animation. Now we do this by using a tween. So to do this, we want to create a new tween. We want to make sure we name this a tween and we expect a tween only. There we go. And then first we want to make sure we add the actual speed onto the damage label so that it goes up in our case. So we can do this by typing the following. We reference what we want to actually use to do this animation, and then we want to change the Y position, and then we actually have to reference the position of our label here, and then add the indicator duration. So this way it will go ahead and start at the bottom of the top of the player, and it will go up by 50 pixels for the duration of 1 second. Then we want to make another animation which will basically fade out our label here. So we do this by starting the same. So we add a new tween property with the damage label, and then we want to use modulate to change the opacity. And this is quite simple. We just want to set it to 0 because we want to make sure it actually fades out entirely and not just a little bit. Then we want to make sure we connect this tween over to our finished signal so that we actually go ahead and cue free the label once we have finished this animation. So what this does is once the animation is finished, we go ahead and call cue free on the damage label. Now this way we actually clear the label from our scene so that we don't use up any more RAM than we have to. So if you're working on a big game, the cue free will be very, very important in your project. So now, if we run this, we will see that we get a confirmation box. We just select current, and then we forgot to add a sprite to the player. So in our case, we'll just use this default Godot icon. And we will have to move it a bit to the center so we can actually see it. That's fine for now. So now when we hit enter, we can see the damage indicator actually showing up here, and it will fade out after 1 second. Now we can obviously spam this, it just depends on how much damage you're taking. So that's the most basic example. Now I want to actually expand upon this and show how you can implement critical damage, if that's something you're interested in. So let's do that right then now. We go back to our script, and we want to make sure that inside of our input here, we also add a random chance to make it a critical hit. So one way to do this is we determine a new variable called isCritical, which will be a boolean, and we set this to a random modulo of 2. So in this case, it'll be a 50% chance that we actually do critical damage. We pass this along to our show damage function. We want to change the parameter here to also include the new passed boolean. So in our case, we do it like that. Then in our show damage function, right where we start, we want to check if it's a critical hit. And if it is, we just simply multiply the amount of damage by 2. Now this is obviously totally up to you if this is how you want to do it. Now you might have some more logic behind this to check how much damage your gun does or something, but obviously in this example I just make it easy like this. So then, to even make it more visible to the player that we actually are doing a critical hit, we want to change the color of the label once it is a critical hit. So we can do this by checking if it's a critical hit again, and then we simply change the color based on if it's critical or not. So we copy this line over here, we paste it in there, we make sure it's indented properly, otherwise we get some weird errors. And then we will just set the color to yellow, so red and green. And then we want to make sure we have an else that just shows the regular red color when it's a normal piece of damage. So now when we run this again, we will see that we have a 50% chance of taking a critical damage. So we see that the color will be yellow when it's critical, and we can also see that the damage is quite more than when we do a normal hit. Right, so that is it for this tutorial on damage indicators. As you can see, it's a quick and easy way to give your game more feedback and polish. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment with what you'd like to see next. Thanks for watching, and bye bye.